Thanks for coming back to our show. Greene said the finale of the show should have happened 6 years ago. What took place behind the scenes? There is more to the truth than what was shown in reruns. Greene was born in Ottawa on February 12, 1915. That winter was one of the coldest Canada had ever seen. The temperature dropped to minus 40 degrees below zero. In 1902, his father, Daniel Greene, ran away from Russia to avoid being harmed by Jews. Although he made 8 hours a week during the war, he ran a very small shoe repair shop. That's how crowded the family's two-room apartment at 127 Clarence Street got. 6 individuals living there. Even Lyon's grandparents, who didn't know any English. Lyon slept on a bed made of stuffing flour sacks with newspaper. For example, in 1918, the Spanish flu killed 1,200 people in Ottawa alone. It was so bad for Lyon, 3, that everyone thought he wouldn't make it. But every hour for weeks, his grandma made him eat raw garlic and honey. He somehow made it through. His mom Dora worked in a workplace 14 hours a day for only 15 cents an hour. Her nightly routine included bringing home torn newspapers she found in wealthy areas. She taught Lyon to read with them because she thought that schooling would keep him from being poor. The 7th Lyon's life changed again on March 15, 1922. At exactly 2:47 in the afternoon, fire broke out in his dad's shoe shop. Electrical problems and the smell of shoe polish set the building on fire. Some tools and equipment worth $400 were lost in the fire. That amount of money would be worth about $6,000 today. Daniel was just about able to stay living. As he tried to save his tools, he burned his hands badly. Their insurance was not paid. Rent was still $200 overdue. They had to leave, where they lived in the basement of the Chapel Street Hebrew Benevolent Society. It was too crowded for 12 families. Lyon used an old army cot to sleep and starting having bad dreams about screaming and fire. There are scars from that fire. He always wanted to have more than one job because he was afraid of getting into debt. Years later, when he was in Hollywood, that fear affected how he made money and stayed away from risky bets. In the end, the Jewish Loan Society gave Daniel $50, and he started a smaller shop. Even so, the family never went back to where they were. Lyon's memory of that loss was bright. Lyon was 13 years old and going to Lisgar Collegiate in 1928. He played the third tree in a school play called The Enchanted Forest that fall. He only had 2 lines, but he stood on stage and made fun of Ottawa's corrupt city government for 5 minutes. The crowd stopped moving and then started laughing out loud. Aside from making fun of the mayor, he even brought up the $10,000 story involving Mayor Frank Plant. There were 3 angry board members who walked out, and the mayor's wife said Lyon should be kicked out of school. He missed school for a week, but his acting teacher told him he was really talented. 2 things were taught to him that night. It started with the power of success. Also, if you spoke out too much in politics, it could be dangerous. Lyon was 16 years old in 1931, a tough time during the Great Depression. In Canada, 27% of people were out of work. Lyon started going to junkyards and dumps to get old lines and tubes that were broken. He meant to make a radio. In his family's coal cellar, he built a 5-tube super heterodyne radio with $2.75 he saved by carrying newspapers and a plan from Popular Mechanics. Lyon worked by candles because his dad wouldn't let him use the lights. Stations from Chicago and Pittsburgh could be heard on the radio. She broke it with a rolling pin when she heard him listening. It was worse than circus people, she said, still angry that a family member failed in show business. Lyon, however, just put it back together in a neighbor's garage and kept playing. Using a homemade microphone, he read newspaper headlines every night from midnight to 2 a.m. He could get away with that radio. Lyon graduated from high school in June 1933. 40% of people in Canada don't have jobs. He was offered a job at the Imperial Bank for 15 hours a week by his uncle. Lyon said no, though. He went to the Ottawa Little Theatre to study acting instead. We paid $8 a month for school. Simply $23 was all he had saved. His dad lost it and burst in anger. The noise from their fight was so bad that neighbors called the cops. Lyon changed its name to Lorne after hearing about the River Lorne in Scotland. They were trying to find a new identity. He used his father's gold pocket watch as collateral to pay for his first semester's tuition. That split in the family lasted 3 years. Nevertheless, Lorne had made his pick. In 1939, Lorne Greene started working for CBC Radio in Toronto. He was 24 years old. He was back from the neighborhood stage in New York. He quickly rose to become the main national announcer at CBC. He even came up with a backwards clock that helped live show hosts keep track of time. It was said that he was the voice of Canada. That nickname changed to something more gloomy when World War II broke out, and he started reading about the deaths of soldiers. Families across the country heard the worst news in his deep, serious voice. As more than 45,000 Canadian troops died, his voice became a sign of death. He was called the voice of doom by many. It bothered him. The sadness was too much, night after night. He quit CBC in the end to join the Royal Canadian Air Force. He worked in broadcasting and read the narrations for wartime films like Churchill's Island and Fighting Norway. That last one got an Oscar. But after the war, CBC tried to take a piece of the money he made from other jobs. No, he said, quit his job as an employee and started working as a freelancer. Lorne opened the Academy of Radio Arts in Toronto in 1945. His term ended in 1952. It didn't make him much money, but he did it to help other people. They were taught by Leslie Nielsen and Mavor Moore. His school taught both acting and making announcements. All of his energy and strength went into it. Lorne helped to open the Jupiter Theatre in Toronto in 1951. Up until 1954, it was on. 4 of the plays they put on were written by Canadians. It was part of Lorne's bigger plan to make something that was only found in Canada. Even though it didn't last, the theater helped make Canada's artistic voice stronger as a whole. A 37-year-old Lorne went to Hollywood in 1952. His weekly pay at CBC was $200. He began from nothing in Hollywood. He got a $3,000 scholarship from the Canadian government to study theater. But because of his deep voice, casting directors thought he was bad. He refused to be made into a certain type. After seeing him on TV, Orson Welles heard him give a speech. Even so, Lorne paid $500 for voice lessons to get rid of his accent. He did something controversial in 1953. He read The Heart of Time, a film about testing nuclear weapons. But he quit the project and lost his $2,500 pay when he found out the government had cut video of animals with birth defects. That choice made him more busy, but anti-nuclear groups respected him for it. Warner Brothers hired him in 1954 and paid him $15,000 a year. As part of his acting work for the crime movie Tight Spot, he broke his nose. He filmed more, not wanting drugs. People respected him for that job. $1.2 million was made from the show. He turned down a $25,000 opportunity to be in a soap opera in 1956 to play a part in the Garrick Power Story, a science fiction radio show that paid only $300 per episode. He was a scientist who was telling people to be careful with radiation. This job showed how much he cared about the world growing. To be sure his facts were correct, he even did some study at UCLA. Even though there were only 26 episodes, scientists and activists like Linus Pauling became aware of him because of the show. In 1957, he tried to start Lorne Greene Enterprises, his own production business. He used the $15,000 he had saved to make a film about the War of 1812. NBC wanted to help with the project, but only if they could control his voice work for 5 years. The deal fell through when Lorne said no. Earlier, he had spent $35,000 on gear and study. Even though he bought the house in Burbank for $18,000 3 years ago, he had to sell it for $16,000. That mistake hurt a lot. His arrival in Hollywood was marked by the house. He learned about contracts that day and never forgot it. Later, when things were going really well for him, he made sure to include clauses for sharing profits and giving artistic input. He learned a lesson, took a risk, built a radio in the dark, and spoke through pain. All of these things shaped the man he would soon play on screen. Lastly, everyone was ready to meet him. He had a voice before anyone ever saw him on TV. In the early 1940s, Canadian stations played Lorne Greene's deep voice almost every night. In his place, he brought war, not fun. He read out the names of soldiers who had died, gave news about battles, and told people about deaths abroad from 1940 to 1945. People stood still when they heard his voice. It was quiet but strong. People known as the voice of doom called him that. Fearing that their son or brother would be next, some people turned off the radio when he came on. Every night, more than 2 million Canadians heard. He was more than just a voice. He was the sound of broken hearts. He was also a flying officer in the Royal Canadian Air Force at this time. One outfit was for war and the other was for radio, and both made him feel heavy. He finally admitted years later that those shows gave him nightmares. This is what Lorne tried to make in 1945, something lighter. He made a stopwatch that could run backwards, which helped radio hosts see how much time they had left. It became the norm in studios. He started the Lorne Greene Academy of Radio Arts in Toronto with the money from that creation. It taught 381 people from 1945 to 1952. 90% of them got jobs in broadcasting. They included Leslie Nielsen and James Doohan, who would both become famous. Unfortunately, Lorne was great at teaching, but not at running a business. The building and the tools cost too much for him. The school was bankrupt by 1952. He had to close it down, sell the building, and move to Hollywood with the money he had left over. He almost lost it all with that move. He wasn't warmly welcomed in Hollywood. His voice was called too serious a lot from 1952 to 1959. Some directors thought he was too stiff for comedies or romantic roles. He only played dads or strict people. Within 7 years, he was only cast in 12 TV shows and 4 movies. Just barely covered the costs. To keep the food on the table, he did audio work behind closed doors under fake names. 1957 was the year he was ready to quit. Unfortunately, his wife talked him into staying another year. Everything changed when they added that extra year. An executive director for Bonanza saw him perform live on TV in Studio One in 1958. That made the door open, but it didn't swing all the way open. Prior to that break, in 1958, he had a small part in The Buccaneer with Yul Brynner and Charlton Heston. A bad cut in the leg during sword training severed a small artery. His wounds were 23 stitches. Since shooting was coming up in a few weeks, he hid the injury. He put on the patch himself, walked without limping, and kept fighting even though it hurt. He had to get hidden care at a nearby hospital because the cut kept opening up. Few people, including his wife and doctor, knew how bad it was. He was almost killed by the sickness. Then, in 1959, he was offered a part in Bonanza, a new Western show. When he was 44, he was told he could play either the father or the oldest son. For help, he asked Leslie Nielsen, one of his old students. He was told by Leslie to act like the dad. He will be the story's focus. Taking on the part of Ben Cartwright, Lorne agreed to a 7-year contract worth $20,500 per show. A color show, which wasn't common at the time, would play. On September 12, 1959, Bonanza made its debut. It didn't blow up right away, but Lorne was already changing the inside of it. After only 16 shows, Lorne said he was going to quit. He believed Ben Cartwright to be cold and uninteresting. He asked that the story show the character as a real father and not just a gun-toting bad guy. That time, the show was ranked 45th and might have been dropped. The writers did listen, though. In episode 13, they changed Ben to make him nicer and smarter. The change did more than just keep the show alive. In the end, it was what made Bonanza so successful. In 1961, it jumped to number 2 on the charts. Set trouble began before the show even got to its best. Lorraine and Pernell Roberts, who played his son, had a lot of problems with each other. Pernell thought Lorne tried to be too bossy and manage everything. A lot of the time, they fought and yelled so loudly that managers had to step in. Lorne believed he was in charge. Pernell thought he was in charge. Almost everything they talked about was wrong. For each show, Lorne was making $10,500 by 1964, plus extra money as a consultant. There were no bonuses for Pernell. He made the same base pay. What happened made the gap bigger. In 1965, after 202 episodes, Pernell left the show. Michael Landon joked, "We took one leaf off the dining table and split the take 3 ways instead of 4. Change was important to Lorne for more than one reason. Too much war had happened to him. Why are we always pointing a gun at someone? That was his question to the producer in episode 13 of the first season. He advised the Cartwrights to be kind before they get violent. That one small word changed the mood of the show. Beyond just gunfights, Bonanza was known for teaching important lessons. Racism, fairness, and respect were all talked about. No one else did that but Lorne. Fighting in the war made him want to make things better. Up until 1961, he was paid $10,000 per show. No one knew that he gave 20% of that, or about $2,000 per show, to Canadian war orphans in a quiet way. He did this secretly for many years. When they did tax checks in the 1970s, the IRS found out. During the war, he saw too many children in Europe and lost his own brother to the flu in 1918. He gave more than $400,000 by the end of Bonanza in 1973. The time is almost $2.8 million today. In the fourth season, he directed his first installment. It was called War Wagon and aired when Bonanza was ranked number 4 in 1962 to 1963. He changed a scene for Dan Blocker to highlight an issue about animal rights. Not everyone on the stunt team liked that, so some of them left the set to protest. It was hard for everyone behind the scenes because Lorne didn't give in. In 1964, his personal life was all over the news. In real life, while shooting, he had an affair that made the tabloids. In 1938, he married Rita Hans, and in 1944, they had twins. When the affair became public, it shocked his friends. In 1964, his song Ringo became the #1 song on the Easy Listening chart and stayed there for 6 weeks. Feeling guilty? Disturbed him. As he tried to fix his image while dealing with his own guilt, he helped write an episode about family values. People were surprised by how popular the song Ringo was. Several young people who bought it thought it was about Ringo Starr. Although it wasn't, Lorne still got about $500,000 in fees. With that money, he helped fight nuclear weapons. He worked for the Canadian National Film Board during World War II, strongly against nuclear weapons. He even sent letters to the U.S. asking them to change the rules. He was aware that protesting in that way might make him less popular with Bonanza's conservative fans. Nevertheless, he did it. By 1966, there was a new fight starting, this time with Michael Landon. Landon wanted the show to have more love stories so that younger viewers would like it more. It didn't appeal to Lorne. It was a trashy escape, he said. 2 different ideas about the show came about when Landon started directing his own episodes. Secretly, there was a war going on. Purnell was no longer there. And now Lorne was in a fight on set with another Sun figure. The stress was getting worse. But he kept the show going even though things were tense. He helped make shows in Season 7 that were directly about racism, like The Wish. It was important to him that Native American artists played the parts. He got spam mail for it. But the NBLACP saw it. People liked him because he broke old stereotypes. Once Bonanza was one of the top 5 shows, it had a lot of viewers, so it used that popularity to talk about important topics. That was something Lorne did. By the end of Bonanza in 1973, Lorne Greene was already a well-known actor. He played the protective dad Ben Cartwright in one of the most popular TV westerns of all time for 14 years. But when he was 63 years old, in 1978, something strange happened. After that, he wrote science fiction. He got the part of Commander Adama on Battlestar Galactica that same year. It wasn't just changing jobs. His career took a huge turn for the worse. In the past, he was known as a rancher who took his kids on trips through the Wild West. Now he was in charge of space, where people's last chance was. The first season had 21 shows and ran from 1978 to 1979. Nevertheless, he returned for 10 more episodes of Galactica in 1980. For reading more news on the radio during World War II, his deep, steady voice was known as the voice of doom. It was perfect for a space leader. People had heard that same voice years before, reading scary military news on CBC radio. He kept thinking about that tone of peace and control. This wasn't a sudden change for Lorne Greene. In 1971, when Bonanza was still going strong, he tried something totally different. It was based on a story by John Steinbeck and lasted 2 hours on TV. In this movie, he played a farmer whose sick wife ran his life. The job was quiet and personal, not at all like the ones he usually does. The film was directed by Boris Sagal, and Julie Summers and Murray Hamilton were also in it. It got a good score of 8.0 out of 10 on IMDb. 34 people have reviewed it. More importantly, it showed Greene could be more than just a steady, wise father figure. He used his own experience as a child growing up in Ottawa with parents who were immigrants to show how hard things really are on screen. Greene was going through hard times even behind the scenes. In 1938, he married Rita Hans, and the 2 of them had twins in 1944. However, in 1960, they split up. In 1961, he married Nancy Deal again, and he stayed with her until he retired. His results were affected by his own highs and lows. Once Bonanza was over, he got parts that let him show more complex feelings. He was in TV shows like Mission Impossible, and he used his own family and death experiences to make his roles more real. He also did documentaries, which took him back to his radio background. He read the scripts for movies like Churchill's Island, War Clouds in the Pacific, and Inside Fighting China in the 1940s. His most useful tool was that deep voice. He used it again to tell stories in the 1970s, but this time through environmental shows. He was in charge of Last of the Wild from 1974 to 1975, an international nature show. It wasn't long before he found the best new job for him. Television show New Wilderness by Lorne Greene premiered on CTV in 1982. As of 1987, the year he died, there were 104 shows of it. There were animals, plants, and the beauty of the wild on the show. He could talk about things he really cared about, like Earth Day, wildlife, and protection. He still felt the pain of Bonanza's last years while working on these shows. The show began to fall apart in season 12, which ran from September 13, 1970, to April 11, 1971. Pernell Roberts had already left in 1965, and the work was getting worse by the early 1970s. NBC started to get in the way too much. With 28 shows, that season's ratings fell to 9th place. Greene believed the show was lacking its soul. In those last few years, he once said that working was like going into a house where someone had died. From 1972 to 1973, the last season, Greene wanted to make a change. And he hoped that the writers would let Ben Cartwright go through a breakup, just like Greene had. NBC said no, though, because they didn't want a family show to talk about divorce or getting married again. Greene felt angry. It seemed like it would have made the figure more real to him. The network refused to risk anything. He felt even worse about the show having lost its heart after being turned down. Around 1974, Greene told the Toronto Star that Season 6 of Bonanza should have been the last one. He said that the show drifted off after that. Strangely enough, nothing could fill the void that Dan Blocker's death created in 1972. Greene knew that new characters like Jamie Hunter wouldn't be the same on NBC. The main figures no longer had the connection they had before. That NBC way of ending the show hurt the most. Greene said that on a Monday, they were told that the show would not happen on Wednesday. No one had a chance to write a long goodbye. There were 431 shows, and the last one aired on January 16, 1973. Even so, it wasn't the last one they shot. It was Greene's idea that little Joe would get married and ride off into the sunset with his family. The show ended without any more action. It was over without a proper goodbye. Greene had some tough talks with his old co-stars after the show finished. He didn't agree with Michael Landon about how to handle the idea of a Bonanza movie in the 1970s. He thought that new things should honor Dan Blocker's memory. Greene believed that some later TV shows did not maintain the values of Bonanza. Often, he and Landon disagreed about what the show should mean to future generations. Those problems didn't go away until Landon died in 1991. Greene died at St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica on September 11, 1987. He was 72 years old. There was more than one illness. After surgery on August 5 for an open bleeding ulcer, he got adult respiratory distress syndrome. His shooting for Bonanza, The Next Generation, was set to begin on October 24 that year. It never happened, though. Several hundred people attended his funeral at Culver City's Hillside Memorial Park. It could hold 300 people in the church. An additional 200 people heard to the 75-minute service through speakers outside. It was with Michael Landon and Pernell Roberts of both. The Bonanza family got back together in peace, but Greene's influence didn't stop there. His new job was as head of the National Wildlife Foundation. He wrote the book about amazing animals by Lorne Greene. Many people learned from his TV show, New Wilderness, even after he died. He wasn't just an actor anymore. He used his words to protect the world and become a guide and storyteller. That same voice that used to bring war news now brought peace and wonder to families watching nature on TV. He was already known as the voice of doom in the 1940s, when he was reporting on the war, because of how serious and steady he sounded. Though the war was over, his voice went away as time went on. After that, it was the sound of America's favorite TV dad and Canada's hope. It was his last wish to play the part that made him famous again, but fate wouldn't let him. Despite that, his impact lives on. The kind of shows where Kevin Costner plays John Dutton, like Yellowstone, bring to mind what Greene made with Ben Cartwright. The thought of a man who will do anything to protect his family, home, and beliefs. That's what Lorne Greene gave to TV. Not only in reruns is he remembered, each strong, thoughtful father who came after him has had this trait.